Summer on the ranch was supposed to be slow, quiet, predictable. That's what I told myself when I drove back from college, my beat-up truck rattling down the dirt road until the familiar sight of home rose up. Pasture stretching wide, the barn leaning a little heavier than last year, the sound of cicadas thick in the warm air. My dad had promised me real work for the summer, which I knew meant fence repairs, hauling hay, and whatever else the sun could cook me under. I hadn't been back long, but already the rhythm of the place had settled in. And yet I was restless. Evenings were the worst. Out here, once the sun dipped low, there wasn't much to do besides listen to the crickets and scroll through my phone. Most of my friends were scattered across different cities, working internships or living lives that felt faster, brighter, more alive than mine. I filled the boredom with texts, sometimes flirting with people I hardly knew, chasing that little buzz of attention. That's how the mistake happened. It was late, the kind of late where the house was dark except for the blue glow of my phone. I'd been messaging someone I met online, a flirty back and forth that was going nowhere but feeding my ego. One daring comment led to another, and before I thought twice, I snapped a picture of myself. Stupid, reckless, shirt off, jeans shoved low enough to leave nothing to the imagination. I glanced at it only briefly before hitting send, my heart racing with the thrill of being bold. But in my haste, I didn't notice the name at the top of the chat. The moment the photo went out, I saw it, Cole. Not the guy I'd been flirting with. Not some faceless stranger behind a username. No, I had just sent a nude picture of myself to my dad's best friend. My stomach lurched so violently I thought I might throw up. I froze, staring at the screen, hoping maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But there it was, the little confirmation checkmark, the mocking timestamp that told me it was too late. Cole, my dad's cowboy friend, the man who had been around my whole life, helping with cattle drives, drinking beers on our porch, fixing busted tractor parts when Dad couldn't. He was tough, steady, with that rugged way of moving that made everything he did look effortless. He was older, wiser, and someone who should never, ever see me like that. Panic thundered in my chest. My thumbs fumbled, pulling up the chat, deleting the photo, deleting the entire thread, as if somehow erasing it on my end would undo what I'd just done. But of course, that wasn't how it worked. He had already received it. Maybe his phone had already lit up in the dark, the picture filling his screen before he even realized what it was. Oh God! I whispered into the empty room, my pulse so loud it drowned out the crickets outside. I dropped the phone on the bed like it had burned me, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. My mind spiraled through every possible outcome. He'd think I was disgusting. He'd laugh about it with my dad. He'd never look at me the same way again. I imagined him showing up at the breakfast table, giving me that knowing smirk while Dad poured his coffee. My face burned so hot I could hardly breathe. For the rest of the night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying that split second when I hit send. I cursed myself over and over, promising I'd never be that careless again. By dawn, I still hadn't slept, and the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. The next morning, I avoided everything. I lingered in my room until I was sure Dad had left for the fields. I crept out for breakfast only when the kitchen was empty. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, terrified it would be Cole replying. But nothing came. No message. No phone call. Just silence. The silence made it worse. That evening, I saw his truck parked outside the barn, and my legs nearly gave out. I ducked behind the old shed, waiting until I heard the crunch of gravel as he drove off. My palms were slick with sweat, my heart hammering like I just run a mile. I felt like a criminal hiding from the law. And so the pattern began. If I heard his boots on the porch, I stayed in my room. If he was working by the barn, I took the long way around the pasture. If Dad suggested I ride along with Cole to check the cattle, I invented excuses, headache, heat stroke, anything to get out of it. Every glimpse of his broad shoulders or his Stetson hat in the distance sent me spiraling back to that night, to the photo burned into my shame. The ranch, once familiar, became a maze of avoidance. I couldn't look my dad in the eye either, terrified he'd somehow know. Every laugh between him and Cole sounded sharper, like they were laughing at me. Nights were the worst. Lying in bed, I replayed it all. The buzz of sending, the sick drop in my stomach, the red-hot shame that wouldn't leave me. I thought about his possible reaction. Anger, disgust, maybe even pity. The not knowing hollowed me out. By the end of the week, I was a wreck. My appetite was gone. Sleep was impossible. And every sound of gravel crunching under tires outside the house sent me into a panic. All because of one picture. 1 second of recklessness. And the whole time, one truth gnawed at me. Sooner or later, I would have to face him. The air in the barn was heavy with the scent of hay and dust, shafts of sunlight breaking through the wooden slats like golden knives. I'd been trying to keep my head down, stacking feed sacks in the corner, hoping Cole would finish up his chores and leave before I had to cross his path. No such luck. I heard the low scrape of boots across the floorboards before I saw him. That slow, steady rhythm that I'd recognize anywhere. My spine stiffened. I kept my back turned, pretending to fuss with a sack that didn't really need fussing. Maybe if I stayed quiet, he'd think I hadn't noticed him. But then came his voice. Smooth, deep, touched with amusement. Well, look who finally decided to show his face. My throat went dry. I swallowed hard, still facing the wall. Just trying to get this stacked before Dad. Before your old man comes in here? He cut in, that hint of a chuckle beneath his words. He didn't sound angry, didn't sound disgusted, just calm, teasing even. I turned slowly, my heart pounding so loud I swore it echoed off the rafters. There he was, leaning against a stall post, arms folded across his chest, hat tipped low enough to shadow his eyes. But I could see the smirk pulling at his mouth. Not cruel, just knowing. My cheeks burned. Listen, about the other night. He raised a hand, stopping me. Don't worry, kid. Your secret's safe. I'm not telling your old man. The relief hit me like a gust of wind, but it was tangled with humiliation. My face flushed hotter, my stomach twisting. I dropped my gaze, staring at the dirt floor like it could swallow me whole. I didn't mean. Relax, he said, pushing off the post and strolling closer. Slow and steady like a horse that knew you were spooked. I ain't here to shame you. Hell, accidents happen. I rubbed the back of my neck, my palms slick with sweat. It wasn't meant for you. It was stupid. Reckless. I'm sorry. He stopped a few feet from me, close enough that I could smell the mix of leather and hay clinging to him. He let out a low laugh, not mocking, but almost soft. You think I don't know that? The look on your face was enough. I groaned, covering my eyes with one hand. God, can we just never talk about it again? For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy but not sharp. Then his voice dropped lower, steadier. Thing is, I don't mind what I saw. My head snapped up. What? He shrugged, casual as anything, though his eyes locked on mine with an honesty that made my chest tighten. I ain't gonna lie to you. You're a good-looking kid. Always been. I'd be lying if I said that picture didn't stir something. The barn seemed to tilt beneath me. My ears roared. I didn't know whether to run or laugh or sink into the hay just to escape his gaze. You, what? I stammered, words tripping over themselves. But, he said firmly, holding up a hand again, don't get the wrong idea. I ain't here to pressure you into a damn thing. That ain't me. You're your own man. If you don't want this talked about again, then that's the end of it. I blinked at him, my mind a blur of emotions. Relief, confusion, a strange flicker of curiosity I didn't want to name. My chest felt lighter and heavier all at once. You're not mad? You're not gonna, tell Dad? Laugh about it. He shook his head, his smirk softening into something steadier, almost protective. No, not my place. And I wouldn't do that to you. Trust me on that. Something in his tone, quiet, sure, unshakable, hit me harder than anything else. For the first time since that night, I felt my shoulders ease a little. The shame was still there, buzzing under my skin, but it was threaded now with something else. Respect, maybe even safety. I let out a shaky breath. I've been avoiding you, thought you'd look at me different, like I was broken. He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head again. Nah, you're just figuring yourself out. Ain't nothing broken about that. Don't matter what you like or who you are. It don't change the work you put in, the kind of man you are, or the respect you deserve. The words settled into me like water soaking dry earth. For days, I'd been drowning in shame, convinced I was ruined. But here he was, steady as ever, Not mocking, not condemning. Just seeing me. I don't know what to say, I muttered. Then don't say anything, he replied with a small grin. Just keep stacking those feed sacks before your old man comes in and thinks we're slacking. I laughed nervously, the sound awkward but real, and turned back to the pile. My hands still shook as I worked, but it wasn't from fear anymore. Every so often, I felt his eyes on me. Not heavy, not demanding, just there, watching, protecting. By the time he left the barn, tipping his hat as he went, I realized the knot in my chest had loosened for the first time in days. The mistake was still there, sure, but it didn't feel like the end of the world anymore. Not when he'd chosen to guard it instead of use it against me. As I wiped the sweat from my brow, I caught myself thinking something I never expected. Maybe Cole wasn't the threat I thought he was. Maybe, just maybe, he was the kind of man who could turn my shame into something else entirely. Even after that talk in the barn, I couldn't shake the weight of what I'd done. Sure, Cole had promised not to tell my dad, and he'd been surprisingly kind. Gentler than I expected a man like him to be, but the shame still clung to me like sweat on a July afternoon. So I kept my distance. I skipped out on breakfast if I heard his boots on the porch. I found excuses to work on the far side of the pasture if his truck was parked near the barn. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, our paths crossed anyway. Life on a ranch doesn't allow for much hiding. Horses need feeding, fences need mending, cattle need watching. And Cole was always around. Steady, dependable, like part of the land itself. The first few times we ran into each other, I braced for awkwardness. But he never mentioned the photo. Not once. He just greeted me the way he always had. Morning. Or, if we were saddling horses, a simple, hand me that strap, will ya? He made no jokes, no sideways glances, no smirks that said I know your secret. First, it unnerved me. How could he just let it go? Didn't it bother him? Didn't he see me differently now? But day after day, he acted like nothing had happened. And slowly, that silence began to feel like a gift. One afternoon, Dad sent me out to help Cole patch a broken stretch of fence. The sun was hot enough to cook the back of my neck, the dry grass crunching under our boots. Cole carried most of the tools in his arms, leaving me with the lighter stuff. I felt clumsy next to him. His movements were practiced, easy, like he'd been born with barbed wire in his hands. Hold that post steady, he said, his voice calm but firm. I pressed my palms against the rough wood, trying to keep it upright while he drove the nails in. Each swing of his hammer was precise, deliberate. He didn't waste strength, didn't rush. I noticed the way he measured twice before striking once, the way he tested each nail with a tug before moving on. Patience, steadiness, loyalty even to the craft of doing things right. You always this careful? I asked, wiping sweat from my forehead. He gave a short laugh. Only way to make it last. Fast work just means you'll be back out here tomorrow fixing the same thing. Ranch don't reward laziness. I nodded, filing that away. I'd always thought of chores as something to get through, to check off the list as quickly as possible. But Cole seemed to treat each task with respect, like it mattered, like even the smallest job deserved to be done with pride. By the end of the afternoon, my hands were blistered and my back ached, but the fence stood firm, and Cole gave me a nod that made something warm stir in my chest. Good work, he said simply, as if the words cost him nothing but meant everything to me. The next week, we ended up feeding the horses together at dawn. The barn smelled of hay and leather, the cool morning air brushing against my skin. I was still half asleep, fumbling with the hay bales, when I heard him chuckle. You're about as graceful as a newborn calf, he teased, reaching past me to cut the twine clean in one swipe. Gee, thanks, I muttered, embarrassed, though his grin softened the sting. He showed me how to toss the hay the right way so the horses spread out instead of fighting for clumps. Little things matter, he said, patting the flank of a mare as she chewed contentedly. I found myself watching the way he handled the animals. Gentle but firm, always calm, never rushing them. The horses trusted him, leaned into his touch, followed his lead. It struck me then. Maybe the reason people respected Cole so much wasn't just because he worked hard. It was because he worked with a kind of quiet loyalty, whether it was with wood, with animals, or with people. And bit by bit, my curiosity grew. Conversations came easier after that. Small talk at first, weather, chores, the endless list of ranch repairs. But then, as days rolled into weeks, it shifted. He told me about growing up poor, about learning the trade the hard way. I admitted I sometimes felt out of place at college, torn between wanting a bigger life and feeling tied to this land. He listened without judgment, never rushing me, never laughing at my worries. He had this way of letting silence hang comfortably, like he understood that sometimes words weren't necessary. One evening, after a long ride to check cattle, we sat side by side on a hill overlooking the pasture. The sky was streaked with gold, the air humming with cicadas. I felt the awkwardness between us thinning, the memory of my mistake fading into something quieter. "You're not so bad to work with," I said, breaking the silence. His mouth curved into a small grin. "Don't let your dad hear that. He'll have me working you harder." I laughed, genuinely this time, the sound surprising me. For the first time in weeks, the shame didn't gnaw at my insides. Instead, something else was taking root. A respect I hadn't expected, maybe even a flicker of trust. The more time we spent together, the clearer it became. Cole wasn't holding my mistake over me. He wasn't waiting for me to slip up, wasn't using it as leverage. He'd buried it, left it behind, and what remained was the simple act of being decent, loyal, protective, and that did something to me I hadn't planned on. I started looking forward to our chores together. I caught myself wondering what he thought of me. Not the embarrassed kid who hit send too fast, but the man standing beside him now, trying to prove he was more than that. I found myself wanting his approval, his respect, maybe even something more I wasn't ready to name yet. Avoidance had turned into something else entirely, and though I still carried the echo of humiliation, it no longer felt like a chain around my neck. With each passing day, Cole was showing me that maybe mistakes didn't have to define a man. Maybe they could lead him toward something he'd been searching for all along. By the time August rolled in, the nights had grown hotter, sticky with the hum of cicadas and the scent of dry grass. Workdays stretched long, but evenings often ended with me and Cole out by the fire pit behind the barn, a couple of tin mugs in hand, the glow of embers softening the shadows on his face. It was during those nights that he started talking. Not the casual banter about chores or weather, but pieces of himself I hadn't expected him to share. One evening, after a day of riding fence lines, he leaned back against a log, hat tilted back, and stared into the flames. "You ever been in love, kid?" he asked suddenly, the question rolling out like smoke. I blinked at him, caught off guard. "I thought I had," I admitted after a moment. "Girlfriends here and there, hookups that didn't mean much, but, I don't know, nothing that lasted." He nodded slowly, tossing another stick into the fire. Sparks leapt up, bright and fleeting. "Last time I thought I was in love, I was about your age. Met a woman in town. Prettiest thing I'd ever seen. Thought I'd marry her, raise a family. But she left after a year. Said ranch life was too hard. Couldn't stand the long days, the silence, the waiting." I studied him in the firelight, the way his jaw tightened as he spoke. "That must have hurt." "Yeah," he said simply. "Hurt like hell. But it taught me something. Love ain't about excitement or fireworks. It's about showing up, keeping promises. It's about knowing when someone's got your back, no matter how rough it gets." The words hit me harder than I expected. I thought back to the girls I dated, the late-night texts, the drunken kisses at parties. None of them had been steady. None of them had been about loyalty. More often than not, they had felt like transactions, attention for attention, body for body. But with Cole, even in the silence, there was something solid. Something that felt like it could hold weight. On another ride, just the two of us checking cattle along the tree line, he shared more. The sun was low, throwing long shadows, and the steady clop of the horses filled the pauses between his words. "You know why I stick around your dad's place so much?" he asked. I shrugged. "Because you like the free meals?" I tried to joke. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Nah, it's because your old man's one of the few people I've ever trusted. Years back, when I lost near everything, he gave me work. Didn't ask questions, didn't judge. Said, 'Long as you're honest, you've got a place here.' That meant more than he'll ever know. So I stick around. Pay him back however I can." There it was again, honesty, loyalty. Words he carried like a creed. I rode beside him, my mind turning. Most people I knew my age were obsessed with chasing thrills, parties, hookups, attention. But Cole, he was built different. He didn't just talk about respect. He lived it. He valued the slow, steady things. Things I'd never given much thought to until I started spending time with him. The shift between us was subtle, like a river wearing down stone. It showed up in small ways. The way his laughter lingered longer when I made a joke. The way his eyes sometimes caught mine across the campfire, holding just a beat too long before he looked away. Or the touches, innocent, but enough to make my chest tighten. A hand brushing my shoulder when he passed behind me in the barn. His knee knocking mine when we sat too close on the tailgate of his truck. Once, while showing me how to tie a proper knot, his rough fingers closed over mine, steadying my grip. The calluses of his skin against mine sparked something that startled me. A warmth that went deeper than the summer heat. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But the truth was, every time he looked at me with that steady gaze, every time he laughed at something I said, I felt it growing. Back in my room at night, I thought about the women I'd dated. How they'd called me cute, how they'd kissed me, how they'd left without a word when they got bored. None of them had made me feel seen. None of them had respected me the way Cole did. Respect. That was the difference. With him, I wasn't just some kid or my father's son, or the idiot who had sent the wrong photo. He treated me like a man, like someone who deserved honesty in return. And in the quiet of those evenings, with the fire dying low and his voice rumbling steady in the dark, I started to realize something I never thought I would. I didn't just see him as my dad's cowboy friend anymore. I saw him as something more. It unsettled me, the way my thoughts kept circling back to him. I'd catch myself watching his hands as he worked, the way they moved with certainty, or the way his shoulders filled the doorway when he stepped into the barn. Sometimes, when the firelight caught his face just right, I had to look away, afraid he'd see what I was thinking. But then he'd laugh low, warm, unguarded, and the sound would pull me back in. Little by little, the shame of that photo, the thing that had once made me want to disappear, was fading into something else. A beginning I hadn't seen coming. One night, as the fire crackled low, I found myself blurting it out. You ever regret staying? Choosing this life? He was quiet for a moment, eyes on the flames. Then he shook his head. Nah. Hard as it is, it's honest. Out here, a man's only as good as his word. You break a promise, you don't just lose respect, you lose yourself. I'd rather have a simple life built on loyalty than a big one built on lies. His words settled deep in me. I realized then that the world I'd come from, parties, shallow connections, people saying one thing and doing another, suddenly felt flimsy compared to what sat beside me. I stared into the fire, heart pounding, and admitted silently to myself what I couldn't yet say out loud. I was drawn to him, not just to the way he looked or the way he carried himself, but to the kind of man he was. And I knew in that moment that everything between us was about to change. The fire popped and cracked as if it carried secrets. We'd worked all day, riding fence lines in the sun until my skin felt baked, then hauling feed until my muscles ached. By the time evening settled in, I was bone-tired, but not too tired to sit out by the campfire with Cole. It had become a kind of ritual between us. When the day was done and the cicadas sang their endless chorus, we'd settle on the old stumps by the fire pit. He'd bring out a bottle of whiskey, and we'd sip in easy silence, the night stretching wide above us. That evening, the stars seemed brighter than I'd ever seen them, endless and sharp, like 1,000 eyes watching. The firelight flickered against Cole's face, throwing shadows across his jaw, catching in the corners of his eyes. He looked comfortable there, like he belonged more to the night and the earth than anywhere else. We drank in silence at first. I let the whiskey burn down my throat, loosening the edges of my thoughts, softening the shame that had haunted me for weeks. Cole didn't talk much either. He never felt the need to fill the air. With him, silence wasn't awkward. It was steady, like the ground beneath my boots. But maybe it was the liquor, or maybe it was the way the firelight made him look almost untouchable, steady in a way I wasn't. Whatever it was, the truth slipped out of me before I could stop it. You're different from anyone I've known, I murmured, my voice low, almost swallowed by the crackle of flames. Cole turned his head slightly, studying me. That so? I nodded, staring into my cup. Yeah, I mean, most people I've been with, it's all surface. Quick laughs, quick hookups, quick goodbyes. But you... I stopped, swallowing the lump in my throat. The whiskey gave me courage, but my heart still hammered hard. Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like. The words hung in the air, heavier than smoke. Cole didn't move at first. He just watched me, calm and steady, like he was giving me space to backpedal if I wanted to. My cheeks burned, my pulse drumming in my ears. I almost wished he'd laugh, make a joke, break the tension. But he didn't. Instead, he set his cup down and leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle. You mean that? I looked up, and our eyes locked. The fire reflected in his, small embers caught in deep brown. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. I don't know what I mean. I admitted, my voice cracking. All I know is, when I'm around you, it feels different. Safer. Stronger. Like I'm not just some dumb kid who doesn't know what he wants. Cole's expression didn't change much, but something softened in his eyes. Ain't nothing dumb about figuring yourself out, he said quietly. Everybody's got to, one way or another. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was charged. I felt it in the space between us, in the way the air seemed to hum. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and curiosity, shame and longing all tangled together. Cole leaned back a little, picking up his cup again, but his gaze never left mine. You wonderings got you restless, huh? I let out a shaky laugh. Restless is one way to put it. He took a slow sip, then set the cup down again, deliberate in every movement. Look, I ain't here to push you into something you don't want. You know that. But if you're curious, I ain't gonna lie, I've wondered myself. The world tilted under me. My skin prickled, heat crawling up my neck. You wondered. He nodded once, calm as ever. Yeah, don't mean I was gonna act on it. Respect matters more than temptation. Always has. But I ain't blind, kid. You're you. My breath caught. No one had ever said something so simple and yet so heavy. You're you. Not a mistake. Not a burden. Not broken. The fire popped again, and I flinched slightly, my nerves stretched thin. He noticed, of course he noticed, and his lips curved into the faintest smile. Not mocking, just patient. You're shaking, he said softly. Because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, I whispered. Good thing you don't have to, he replied. His voice was steady, low, carrying something that settled in my chest like a stone. Not tonight. Not ever unless you want to. The tension between us thickened, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was magnetic, like the pull of the stars overhead, like the crackle of fire daring me closer. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You make it sound so simple. It is, he said, leaning closer now, slow enough for me to see every movement. It's just yes or no. That's all. My heart thundered, but for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of it. I felt alive. He was close now, so close I could see the flecks of lighter brown in his eyes, the lines etched into his face from years in the sun. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, the faint scent of smoke in his shirt. My entire world narrowed to that small space between us. His hand twitched, like he wanted to reach out, but he held himself back. His control was steady, almost infuriatingly patient. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in. His face hovered near mine, the firelight painting him in gold and shadow. I could feel his breath warm against my skin, but he didn't close the distance. He stopped, waiting. My lips parted, 1,000 thoughts colliding in my head, but none loud enough to drown out the single truth thundering in my chest. This was no mistake. Still, he didn't move. His eyes held mine, steady and calm. The question unspoken but clear as day. Do you want this? The night held its breath with me, the stars watching, the fire whispering. And for the first time, it wasn't shame that filled me. It was choice. The firelight flickered against his face, his eyes steady on mine as he hovered there, so close that the world seemed to narrow down to the breath between us. My chest rose and fell fast, my hands trembling in my lap. He was waiting, calm, patient, giving me the choice. And finally, I found my voice. Yes? I whispered, barely audible above the crackle of the flames. I want to know. The corners of his mouth twitched, not in a grin but in something softer, relieved, like he'd been holding his breath too. Then he leaned forward the last inch and kissed me. It wasn't rough. It wasn't rushed. His lips pressed against mine with a gentleness that startled me, tender but burning with something held back for too long. For a moment, I froze, my mind racing, my body unsure, but the warmth of him melted the hesitation. I closed my eyes and leaned into it, the world tilting as sparks shot down my spine. His hand rose slowly, brushing the side of my jaw, his thumb grazing my cheek like he was memorizing the shape of me. I'd been kissed before. Sloppy, eager, careless kisses that had left me feeling like a means to an end. But this was different. He kissed me like I mattered, like he wasn't trying to take anything, only give. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm and uneven. "Still good," he murmured, his voice low, rougher than usual. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. "Good," I managed. "Better than good." That earned the smallest smile from him, the kind that made my chest ache. We shifted closer on the old stump, knees brushing, shoulders pressing together. The fire popped, sending sparks into the night sky, but all I could feel was him. Solid, steady, radiating warmth. He kissed me again, deeper this time, his hands sliding to the back of my neck. I felt the suppressed fire in him, the restraint, the hunger he kept carefully tethered. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, as if he wanted to show me that he'd never take more than I was ready to give. And with every touch, every glance, he gave me a choice. Stay or pull away. Each time I stayed. Each time I leaned closer. My hands found his chest, broad and firm under his shirt, and the simple contact made my head spin. He wasn't just some fantasy. He was real, flesh and bone, heartbeat strong beneath my palms. "You're shaking," he said softly against my lips. "Not from fear," I admitted. His eyes darkened, but his smile stayed calm. "Good." We moved from the stump to the ground near the fire, the cool grass brushing against my hands as we sank into it. He lay beside me, propped on one elbow, his other hand brushing my hair back from my forehead. The way he looked at me, steady, unflinching, made me feel exposed in a way I'd never felt, yet safe at the same time. The kisses deepened, slow at first, then more urgent as the fire between us grew. But even in the urgency there was care. He paused often, searching my face, waiting for the smallest nod before continuing. It wasn't lust driving him forward, it was something deeper, something rooted in respect. His touch was rough from years of work, calloused and strong. But when his fingers skimmed my arm, my jaw, my back, they were gentle as though he feared breaking me. Every brush of his hand told me something words couldn't. "You're wanted. You're safe. You matter." I'd never felt that before. Not once. The night wrapped around us, the fire crackling low, the stars endless above. I lost track of time, lost track of everything but the warmth of his body close to mine and the way his breath hitched when I whispered his name. At some point, I realized I was no longer comparing him to past lovers. Those old memories, quick, careless, empty, had no place here. This wasn't about distraction or validation. It wasn't about filling silence. This was about trust. When he kissed down the side of my neck, pausing as if asking again, I tilted my head willingly, silently telling him yes. When his hand slipped under mine, lacing our fingers together, I squeezed back, grounding myself in him. Every step we took that night was a step together. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to perform or prove myself. I didn't feel like I was just a body someone wanted for a moment before tossing aside. I felt seen. I felt chosen. As the fire died to embers, we lay side by side in the grass, my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His arm circled me loosely, not trapping but holding, protective in its ease. "You all right?" he asked, his voice rumbling through me. "More than all right," I whispered. He kissed the top of my head, lingering there. "Didn't want to rush you. Still don't." "I know," I said, my voice thick. "That's what makes it different. You didn't rush. You respected me." He tightened his arm around me, silent for a moment. Then he said, "Respect's the only way it means something." And lying there, In the warmth of him, I realized something sharp and certain. This wasn't about lust. It wasn't about a mistake or curiosity anymore. It was about trust. About the way he looked at me like I was worth more than the reckless choices I'd made. Like I was more than a mistake sent over text. When sleep finally came, it wasn't restless. It wasn't haunted by shame or anxiety. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady, whole. And in the quiet of that night, I knew I'd stepped into something I couldn't walk back from. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to. The first light of dawn crept across the fields, washing the horizon in soft gold. The campfire had burned down to a quiet bed of ash, still warm, but most of its glow came from the man lying beside me. Cole's breathing was deep and steady. One arm draped over me as though even in sleep he was protecting something fragile. I lay there, staring at the rising sky, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't replaying my mistakes. I wasn't drowning in shame. Instead, I felt light, whole. I shifted slightly, and his eyes opened, soft but alert in that way cowboys always seem to wake. He blinked at me, then offered a small smile. "Mornin', kid." His voice was gravelly, rough with sleep, but warm in a way that tugged at my chest. "Mornin'," I murmured back, my throat tight. For a moment we just lay there, listening to the quiet hum of the waking ranch, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the call of a bird overhead, the whisper of wind through the grass. Felt surreal, like the whole world had gone still just for us. Finally, I drew a shaky breath. "Cole, I gotta say something." He propped himself up on one elbow, watching me with that steady gaze that always made me feel both nervous and safe. "All right, say it." I hesitated, the words fighting to stay hidden, but I forced them out anyway. "I always thought I was straight. That was just what I told myself, what I told everyone. But being with you last night, it showed me something better, something real." His expression didn't waver. He didn't laugh, didn't flinch. He just listened. I pressed on, my chest tightening with the weight of honesty. I don't even know what to call it. I don't know what label fits, or if it even matters. All I know is, when I'm with you, I feel seen. I feel respected, wanted in a way I've never felt with anyone else. And I don't want to lose that. Not ever. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the grass. Then he reached out, brushing his rough fingers against my cheek in the gentlest way. His voice was low, steady, certain. "Listen to me, kid. Love ain't about labels. Never has been. Doesn't matter what you thought you were or what box you fit in. All that matters is what's real between us. And what I felt last night, that was real. That was more honest than most folks ever get in a lifetime." My throat ached, my eyes burning. "You really believe that?" "I do," he said without hesitation. "And I ain't gonna run from it. Not now, not ever. Question is, are you willing to stand in it with me?" I let out a laugh that was half a sob, half relief. Yeah, I am." He smiled then, a rare, unguarded smile that made him look younger, softer. He leaned in and kissed me, slow and certain, sealing the promise between us. Later that morning, as the sun climbed higher, we saddled the horses for the day's chores. But something had shifted. Where before there had been tension, hesitation, now there was ease. We worked side by side, quiet but content, a rhythm that felt natural. Every glance he gave me, every brush of his hand against mine, carried weight now, not of secrecy, but of something steady and growing. When we paused at the fence line, overlooking the wide stretch of pasture, I turned to him. "So, what does this mean? For us?" He adjusted his hat, squinting against the sun, then looked at me with that same unwavering gaze. "Means what you want it to mean. If you want us to be real, then that's what it is. A relationship. Not just a mistake, not just curiosity. Something we build, day by day." I felt the words settle into me, heavy but right. "Yeah, that's what I want. I want this to be real." "Good," he said simply, nodding once. "Then we'll take it one day at a time. Ain't no rush, ain't no rules. Just you and me, figuring it out." I smiled, the knot in my chest finally loosening for good. That night, lying in bed, I thought back to the moment that had started it all. The reckless photo I'd sent in the dark, the mistake that had nearly drowned me in shame. For so long, I'd cursed myself for it, replayed it in my head as the dumbest thing I'd ever done. But now I saw it differently. That accident had cracked something open in me, forced me to face truths I might have kept buried forever. It had led me here, to him, to the steady loyalty of a man who saw me for who I was, not who I pretended to be. I realized then that I was grateful. Grateful for the mistake. Grateful for the shame. Grateful for the night that had changed my life. Because in the end, it hadn't just been about lust or curiosity. It had been about trust, about honesty, about finding love where I least expected it. And as I drifted into sleep, I held on to that truth like a promise. Whatever came next, we'd face it together.